Well, we've titled the series The Good Work. And even though we've titled the series The Good Work, we also recognize that work, especially your work life, has a lot of emotions and questions associated with that. Right? There are a lot of emotions, a lot of questions surrounding your work life. Questions like, why am I doing this job? What's the point of this work that I do? Questions like, why cannot I do what I love? Why? Why can't I do what I love? Questions like, why is my work difficult? Why is it challenging? Questions like, why am I underpaid? Why am I underpaid? Why can't I just go on vacation? Why can't I just chill? Why can't I just retire early and just enjoy my life? And these are real, legitimate questions. And so I want you to know that we recognize this as we look at this series, as we look at God's Word. We recognize that these are legitimate, real questions, real emotions. Some of you maybe are unable to work because of health or sickness or challenges in your life. You're not able to work. Some of you want to work, but you don't have work. Some of you work, but you're working in areas that are difficult and monotonous, and you don't love what you do. So there could be a lot of discouragement in this room. There could be a lot of sadness in your life. There could be a lot of loneliness and even frustration and anger when it comes to your work. So the question is, does God have anything to say about your work? He does. Your work matters to God. We're gonna slowly unwrap this through the series, but I wanted to tell you, your work matters to God, and God matters to your work. Your work matters to your God. How you work, why you work, where you work, how you decide on everything matters to God. In the midst of your challenges, in the midst of your struggles, in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the toil, your work still matters to God. Okay? But how you work is not going to happen. How you fulfill God's purposes in your work, how you live out His image, all of that is not possible just by your strength. God matters to your work. You have to understand. You have to hear. You have to understand how God matters for your work. Because that's the only way we're going to enjoy and be satisfied in work. All right? Even as we continue, I want you to just have a broader definition of work. Your work is not just what is paid. Your work is not just what you do from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday or Saturday, whatever. No, your work is much more. Biblically, your work encompasses everything. It encompasses both paid and unpaid work, both formal and non-formal, both outside the house and inside the house. Work is all kinds of stuff, right? So this series, this is our desire. This is my desire for you, right? I really want you, in a small way, I want you to grasp a new vision for your work, a new vision. I want you to grasp a new sense of purpose, right? A new purpose for your work. So this morning I've titled this sermon as the sacred calling to work, the sacred call to work, right? We're looking at Genesis chapter 1, 26 to 31. How do we understand God's calling? For that, the first thing I want to understand, I want to place before you is, to really live out your calling, you need to understand God's calling. What is God's calling? What does that mean? When you say God has called me, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is He calling me to? Right? So understanding God's calling. Look at verse 27. Verse 27, chapter 1 of Genesis. It says, God created man in His own image. And in the image of God, He created a male and female, He created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. Right? In chapter 2 verse 15, he begins to explain in a summary statement, what does it mean to be fruitful? What does it mean to multiply? What does it look like to fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion? Chapter 2 verse 15, God says, the Lord took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and to keep it, meaning to cultivate it and to conserve it, to produce and to protect. Right? We looked at this last week, but the biblical view of work and creation is radically different from any other religious philosophies in the world. Radically different. Work is not a curse in the Bible. Work is not evil. Work is not a hindrance for your good life. Work is not a drudgery. It can seem like that, but it is not. Work, in fact, is God's gracious gift to mankind so that he can flourish, so that others can flourish. It is God's gracious gift for human flourishing. God, in fact, calls us, right? He created, and he goes about the work of creation. He is working, and he calls us to co-labor with him. Right? He calls us. So your work is a big part of that. In fact, we read this quote last week. It says from Al Walters, he says, "The earth had been unformed and empty. God had formed it and filled it, but not completely. People must now carry on the work of development. By being fruitful, they must fill it even more. By subduing it, they must form it even more. Mankind, as God's representatives on earth, carry on where God left off." Right? He created and he gave you the raw materials, and God says, now carry on, be fruitful and multiply, I'm with you. Right? God calls us to work and to keep. You know why? Because we are made in God's image. It's important. It is important. You are made in God's. That is why you have a desire. There is a longing to work. There is a passion to work. You cannot just simply sit. And I know we want to simply sit. Right? You want to. When you're working, you're thinking, I just want to simply sit. I just want to just be on vacation, sipping some drink somewhere. I don't want anything, right? You think that's heaven for you. It is not. You go on vacation, right? There was a time when we did a 10-day vacation, right? 4th day, I'm like, man, and beach and all is nice, but I want to go back. I want to go back. When am I going back? When am I going back? What I want to do? You want to do work. Why? It's part of God's image. He has made you that way. Ask anybody who is not able to work, right? Who was unable to work because of health issues or because of some challenges or sickness or whatever. They will tell you, give me something to do. They want to be productive. Give me something to do. That's why in the prison, in the jail, when people are in prison, the worst thing is solitary confinement. Right? There, people are happy folding clothes. People are happy folding envelopes. People are happy just arranging things, just gardening. Oh, they're happy. Why? They're saying, don't just leave us here. Give us something to do. So my friends, I want you to understand your work. You don't need work. You don't need to work so that you can make money to survive. You need work itself to survive. Oh, without work, there is nothing without. You need work itself. So work is God's gracious gift for our survival, for a lot of our things, right? So we're going to see what that is. So every work you do resembles the work God did. God is cultivating. God is conserving. God is protecting. God is forming. God is shaping. God is bringing life into things where there is no life. God is arranging. God is organizing. God is initiating. God is doing all of these things in creation, and then He makes us in His image and He says, come on, work like this. Every work you do resembles that. Let's think about this, right? Think of a musician, right? Anupam is here. Anupam is a musician. He's sitting and he's making, what music you do? It's like some music you do. What is that? Some beats or something. What is that? Loops. He does these loops, all of these things. What do you think of this, right? If I take the guitar and I start strumming, you're not going to be here, right? I'll probably just do something. You don't want to hear that. But what is a musician doing? What is a musician doing? They are bringing notes. If I just keep playing C major, gring, 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 C major. If I just keep, what is it? It makes no sense. But you're bringing C major and D major. A minor. See, you're bringing all that. Hopefully you're a skilled musician. Hopefully you know what you're doing. If I'm doing this, I'll mix everything, right? You're bringing the majors and the minors and all of that. You're bringing the notes together, right? You're forming them together. You're arranging them together so that when you play, it is producing meaning and beauty. As a musician, you are reflecting the image of God. Are you tracking me? Oh man, there's something there. God is calling you to work like Him. So it's not just making music. When you're making the spreadsheet, how many of your work involves spreadsheets? You guys like, you like spreadsheets? A little bit, I like spreadsheets. When you're making that spreadsheet, what is a spreadsheet? This is just an Excel spreadsheet. What is this? Is it a spreadsheet? No, my friends, when you make that spreadsheet, you're taking raw data, unformed. This data has no meaning. You give me a table with data, I have no idea what it is, right? You're bringing raw data together and you're putting it in a spreadsheet and you're making a graph or a table that will make sense. You're bringing meaning out of some raw material. Every work you do resembles the Creator. And God says, come, I want you to enjoy the work like this. My friend, everything you do, I want you to understand this. When you are cleaning your room, how many of you like to clean your room once in 6 months, right? You're single, and when you're cleaning your room, I remember me and my brother, you cannot enter our room. Our clothes will be everywhere, hanging everywhere. I mean, it was like one disaster zone. So my mom is always, once in 6 months, she wants us to clean. When you're cleaning the room, what are you doing? You're bringing order into chaos. Oh, you're bringing things together to structure and order and organize so that it can be a place of flourishing, a place that is producing life and joy and happiness. You are not living in some dump. So when you're cleaning, listen to this. When your helper comes into the home and they are cleaning your home, they are helping you bring order to your home so that germs and disease, or it is not a filth, you're not living in filth. No, so make sure you understand everybody who does their work is reflecting the image of God. Your work matters. Your work matters, right? But why is this hard? Why is this hard? Because we don't understand the calling of God. We don't understand how God is calling us, right? So the first thing, I'm going to give you 3 ways to understand God's calling. The first thing, God's calling us to work, God calling us to work is a calling to a life of dignity. Okay? God calling us. God is calling us. What is God's calling? God is calling you to work to a life of dignity. It's a call to dignity, right? Let's see how that is, right? I want you to understand, your worth and value does not come from your work. See, you may be sitting here and you say, Ranjit, you already talked about dignity last week. Why are you repeating, right? We already know. We are raised in good homes. We respect everybody. We treat everybody kindly. We show respect and all. We know dignity. We know all these things. No, you don't, right? We don't. I want you to understand your worth and value does not come from your work. In chapter 2, verse 15, when God commands you to work, your worth and value does not come from that. Your worth and value comes from chapter 1, verses 27. God makes you in His image. Are you tracking me? Why is this important? This is absolutely important because in the world, in culture, they are always assigning worth and value to you based on your work. You tracking me? And we also do that. We subtly believe that. When you see Batman Begins, I'm not going to spoil the story. Some of you don't watch any of these things, and I tell and you get upset with me, right? So I'm going to just tell a small phrase. Batman Begins. This is what Batman says, right? It's not... I'm not going to use his voice. I'm tempted. But I'm not. It's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you. Batman. It's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you. The Bible is completely contrary to Batman. Completely contrary, right? The Bible says, no, it is not what you do that defines you. It is who you are. You are a child of God. You are an image bearer of God. And my friend, that is why your work has dignity. Right? And somebody was talking about how we hear this. We hear this everywhere. Work is worship. Right? In the auto. Everywhere. Work is worship. Right? What is that? Is that same? Is it from the Bible? Is it? No. You need to understand what people mean when they say work is worship. We don't worship work. The culture worships work. We don't worship work. We worship God through our work. Right? Work is not the end. Work is a means to God, to enjoying God. It is because people worship work, they assign value and worth based on work. No, our value and worth is not based on our work. Right? You might be sitting here, I understand this. Ranjit, I understand all this. I understand this. But I want to gently push you, right, to really understand, because we all struggle with dignity. We all struggle with dignity of work. We all struggle with dignity of workers. We all struggle with our own dignity based on the work. We struggle. We struggle. Why? Because we put value and worth on the work. It's called dualism. It's called dualism. Now, dualism, what it means is, dualism is this worldview that separates the world into secular and sacred. Okay? Dualism simply means some parts of creation is better than other parts of creation. Some parts of creation is inherently good, while some parts of creation is inherently evil. That's dualism. In our culture, we are inundated with dualism, and it is present even in the church. Right? When we look at our work, even though our head and our brain will say, yes, there is dignity, yes, because we are made in the image of God, yes to all these things, but functionally when we live as dualists. We're living as dualists. Right? Let me tell you how. You ready? Are you a dualist? No? Okay, let me tell you how. Firstly, employment versus work. All right, employment versus work. Okay? We are dualists when it comes to employment versus work. Think of this. And I see this in my kids too, right? We always like work that gets paid. And we don't enjoy work that is not paid. Do you agree with me? You're like, oh, no. You agree with me? With my kids, I see this in my kids. When I tell them to do some chores, clean up your room, fold the clothes, put the clothes in the dryer and washing machine, or put it in the, rolling their eyes. Their eyes are rolling always, right? But when I say, hey, I'm gonna give you some money, right? I'll give you some. Immediately, the work is done. Are you tracking me? We are dualists because in some way we value work that is paid more than the work that is not paid. And that is why there are seasons in life when you are not paid. There are seasons in life when you're not able to work outside the home. Maybe there is even work. You may be working outside the home, but when you come into the home, parenting, organizing the home, cleaning, you don't like all these things. Why? Because you think, I'm working something that's more important because it's paying me. This work is not important. I am better than this work. You tracking me? Dualists. All work has dignity. All work has dignity. Because functionally this is how we live, it subtly changes how we look at people who work. We are a dualist in how. Yeah, we can say, yeah, child of God and image, all of that. But because we value work that is paid, we look down on work that is not paid. We look down on people who work in areas that is not paid. We are a dualist. Why are we because we don't understand God's calling to all work. Not just employment versus work. Even in employment, we have a hierarchy. Don't we have a hierarchy in employment? We like certain kinds of employment over others. We like certain titles over others. We like employment based on how much they pay. Why? Because that shows my worth and value. There is a hierarchy even in employment. Don't you agree or not? Right? We have a hierarchy in employment. I told you last week we were talking about how, where I come from in the south, engineers and doctors, this is what, they will churn you out. In city of Chennai, there was like 300, 400 engineering colleges. Can you believe 304 engineering institutions, I think, in the whole region. It's crazy. Imagine a world which has only engineers and doctors. You tracking me? Right? Imagine. No, that's crazy world. You don't want too many engineers and doctors. No, subtly we have a hierarchy in employment, and so we look down. We look down on the arts. We look down on whatever, I don't know what degrees are there. We look down on certain aspects of degrees. Why? Because we value certain aspects of degrees. Why? Because it's paid more. Are you tracking me? We are a dualist. My friend, I want you to recognize how much of a dualist you are. Because only then you can understand God's calling. If you say, no, I'm not dualist, we are all dualists. We are all dualists. Think of another way. Sacred work and secular work. How many of us are raised to think that serving in the church is better than serving in the marketplace? Subtly. And my field is to blame because we've not taught God's word properly. Somehow we think, playing guitar in the church, doing something in the church, pastoring, a missionary event, somehow it's sacred. It is something, it's a high calling compared to being a manager, being a banker or a teacher, or doing something in the marketplace. This is sacred. So sometimes when you go into your workplace, you go with this guilt, feeling like you're somehow less, or feeling like you're not doing something that matters. No, my friends, we are a dualist because the Bible does not say that. We are all dualists by nature. And because of that, why we choose work, how we choose work, what career we choose, how we view people, everything is shaped by that dualist nature, by this worldview. Why we are frustrated at work, why we are disappointed, why we are upset, all of that is also shaped by this dualistic worldview. And because we constantly struggle with this dualism, we are not able to live out as image bearers. My friend, God is calling. I want you to understand, in the Bible, there is no difference between calling to ministry and calling to the marketplace. There is no difference between a calling to be a gardener or calling to be some management person. No, my friends, there is dignity to all work as image bearers, and there is dignity for all workers. And you have dignity because you're made in God's image. You're made in God's image. This is one of the key things that came out of the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation was not just fighting legalism in the medieval church, they were fighting dualism also. And this is what Martin Luther says, right? During the Protestant Reformation, he says, when a father or a mother goes ahead and washes diapers or performs some other menial task for his child at home, right? When a father or mother is washing diaper or doing some menial task at home for the children, God with all his angels and creatures is smiling, not because the father and mother are washing diapers, but because they are doing so in Christian faith as an image bearer. It matters to God. It matters to God. How you treat that child, how you do your work, even though we may think, and culture and the world may think it's menial, it doesn't pay you anything, it doesn't have, but how you work matters to God. So my friends, God's calling is a call to a life of dignity. In your work, doesn't matter what work you do, work is an act of, it's being dignified. God is giving you worth and value through your work because he has called you. He has called you. So God's calling is a calling to a life of dignity. God's calling is not only that. God's calling is a calling to a life of worship. A life of worship. When you think of that, worship is not something we do 15 minutes we're singing. That's not, yeah, we worship through songs. But that's not only worship. Worship is not like 1.5 hours in church. No, you are called to worship God all of your lives, wherever you are. So how does that work? It will only work when you understand you worship God through your work. Now, how is it? How do I worship God through the work? It is there in the Bible. In Scripture, the word for work, in chapter 2, verse 15, God says, I want you to work and keep it. The word for work there is avoda. But it is the same word in Hebrew for worship. I want to understand this. This is radical. God is saying, when I'm calling you to work, I'm actually calling you to a life of worship before me. It is not just doing some task. It is not just doing some job. No, you are worshiping. You are worshiping God through your work. When you make that spreadsheet, when you finish that assignment, when you pay your bills, when you run errands, when you help somebody, when you take that call, when you make that sale, every work is an opportunity to step in and worship God. You tracking me? God is calling. God is calling. God is calling you to a life of dignity and value. God is calling you to worship him. Right? That's the call he's giving. Calling you to worship him. And lastly, thirdly, God is calling us to work. God's calling us to work is a calling for divine satisfaction. There is something satisfying about your work. Right? Here's a verse in Ecclesiastes, and I love this. Ecclesiastes 3:13. It says that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. Let them find satisfaction in all their toil, in all the work. Why? This is a gift of God. This is a gift of God. I want you to understand. The CEO who makes a sale or a project or a merger or whatever that is, and somebody who works paving the roads and pavements, both of them, after a day's labor, they can go home and they can sleep satisfied. Why? It's a gift of God. It doesn't matter what work you do. It's not that the CEO is sleeping so soundly and no. You can enjoy the same satisfaction from a good day's work. Why? It's a gift of God. And God, when he calls you to work, he's calling you to enjoy this divine satisfaction from the work you do. How do we know this? We see this in Genesis 1:31. It says, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. What's happening? When he finished the first day, what did he say? It was good. When he finished the second day, what did he say? It was good. Third day, what did he say? It was good. We're like, yeah, I get the point. Fourth day, he says it was good. Fifth day, he says it was good. Sixth day, he says it was very good. What was God experiencing? He was experiencing what we call job satisfaction. You know what that is? You know what that is? Right? Sometimes we forget what that is. God has created, and he steps back and he looks at his work and he's divinely satisfied with the work he's created, my friend. And God, by calling each one of you, he's saying, in the work you do, I want you to step in and experience my satisfaction. When you do your work as an image bearer, when you do your work understanding that God has called you, He has placed you there, oh, there is a life of dignity. It is a life calling to a life of worship. It's a calling to a life of satisfaction. You tracking me? This is God's calling. This is how you understand God's calling. God's calling is not some vague thing. He is calling us to our work for these reasons. Not only understanding God's calling, right? Not only understanding God's calling, how do we discern God's calling? How do we discern God's calling? How do I know God is calling me? How do I know which career to choose? Which degree to choose? How do I know if I'm in the right career or not? Some of you feel like you're on the wrong line of work. What do you do then? And there's so much confusion, so much fear in this line of God's calling. I don't know. What if I miss God's calling? How do I know this? It's not magical. You don't have to be afraid of God's calling. There are 3 ways. I'm going to give you 3 practical ways to discern your calling, right? And really help us understand how to practically use it, right? 3 ways, 3 practical ways. One is affinity, ability, and opportunity. Affinity, ability, and opportunity. Now, all of these things, 3 things are in the context of community. God brings parents, God brings teachers, God brings people who love you, God brings elders, God brings friends and peers, God brings the church and community. All of them come around you, and you discern God's calling through your affinity, through your ability and opportunity. It is in the context of community, right? You don't take a vacation somewhere to some mountain and figure out affinity. No. It's in the context of community. God uses people to affirm His calling. Right? Let's see how that is. Firstly, affinity. What is affinity? Affinity is, what do I resonate with? When I see this world, when I see the needs around me, when I see the marketplace, what resonates? What am I passionate about? What moves me? Where do I sense some kind of a responsibility or obligation to step in? What are those things? That's affinity. Right? What is your passion? What is your desire? Secondly, ability. Not just affinity, ability as well. What am I good at? What am I not good at? It requires a realistic self-analysis, because you may think you're good at a lot of things. You may not. We may not think we are good at some things, but the community of God comes around and affirms some of those things. Right? Maybe what are those abilities? What are those gifts? What are those talents? Are you good at organizing? Are you good at leading, speaking? Are you good at problem solving? Are you good at writing? Are you good at teaching? Are you good at helping? All of this is validated in the sense of community, right? Affinity, ability. The third one is opportunity. Opportunity. What door is open before you? Okay? What job is there? Now, these are three ways, right? When God is calling you in some way, all of these 3 things come together. You sense God's call when these 3 things come together. Okay? You sense God's call when you have affinity, you see a passion. God has placed certain desires in you, right? When you see God's call, you're able to see some ability, and you're able to see some opportunity for it. Okay? That's the sweet spot. But let me tell you, because of sin and brokenness in this world, all of these things are not going to be 100%. You tracking me? I want you to understand this. This is important. Sin and brokenness, and you add living in India, right? You add living in India. In India, nobody is in the sweet spot. Maybe there are few. Now tell me, let's have a show of hands, right? How many of you feel like you're in this life spot, you're in this season of career, whatever that is, where, you are in the right spot of affinity, your passion, you have the right abilities for it, and you have the right opportunity. How many of you like that? Just put your hands up. Show your hands. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to ask you anything, right? Just a quick statistic. How many of you feel like, man, I love and enjoy what I do. I feel like I've got the skills for it and I have the opportunity to do and excel. How many of you are like that? Very few. Don't be discouraged. Are you tracking me? No. It's God's calling is not happen only when all these things happen. In a broken world, in a sinful world, we are never going to understand all of these things fully. And yet God calls you. Yet God calls you. There are seasons in your life where you may have the affinity. You may have a passion, but you may not have the ability or the opportunity. There are seasons like that. And I was growing up, when I was in college, I was passionate. I really wanted to play football. Some of you don't believe I'm walking like this, right? When I sleep and I dream of football. In heaven, I always think I'm playing football in heaven, right? That's all I think about. I really love the sport. I felt like I really thought I had the skills. In my own humble opinion, I was pretty good. I had the affinity, but there was no opportunity. Right? Now, I still remember when I was in college, and this was important because I really, something happened in that time, right? So in my college, only they asked me to go for this trial. So there's a trial for the state team and stuff like that. So they said, Ranjit, you can go. So they said, you need to come to the stadium, right? So I said, okay. And it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal, right? So I took an auto in the morning, 7 o'clock. I'm going to this place where the trials are happening, right? I took the auto. I told him this. I don't know the city too much. Anyway, so I said one stadium. So we go to. I thought that's the stadium. I go to the stadium. It's empty. The stadium is empty, right? Nobody's there. Thankfully, the auto man was staying because I was talking to him. He was like, nobody's here. So we are sitting there. I go to the stadium, empty, right? Man, I felt like I was sinking. Oh, my heart just broke because I didn't know where they were doing the trials. I thought this is the place. So I came back to the auto, and the auto man didn't know what to do. I said, you just drive the auto, right, in Chennai. He just drive. So, okay, I'll drive. So he's driving somewhere, right? And as we are going in the auto, my heart is crushed. I felt like my dreams of playing and all, it is just being crushed. But I knew God was with me. God was doing something, right? And we are driving. The auto man suddenly stops him and he says, hey, why don't you go into the stadium and check? He stopped, I go in, that's where the trials are happening, right? And suddenly I got excited, I go in, and of course I didn't get selected. I come back, but I knew something at that moment. Because I knew God was clearly telling me, Ranjit, I know you have a passion, but I'm not calling you for football. I can open doors for you if you want. And like I did, magically the stadium appeared. I can do all these things. But I want you to understand, I have not called you for football. At that moment, even though I had a passion, because of lack of opportunity, I said, God, that's okay. Sometimes you may have a passion for things, but you may not have an opportunity. That's okay. That's okay. God is still working in your life. Oh, God is shaping your life. Don't get frustrated because of lack of opportunity. Don't get frustrated because you don't have the skill. God is still shaping. It may happen later. It may not happen. It may happen a few years. God is still working in your life and He is still calling you. Are you tracking me? Some of us and some of you, you may have the ability, but you may not have a passion. You may have the ability, right? I can think of guys who are doing creative photography, or people who are designers. They have a passion to design, but they are probably working in areas where they don't give you creative freedom. A musician, you have a passion for music, but then you need to play Bollywood music all the time, right? You have a passion, but you are placed in roles where there is no opportunity to thrive. That's okay. That's okay. Maybe you have an opportunity to do something, but you don't have the passion or you don't have the skills. My friend, what do you do in that cases? What do you do? What do you do in this world, in the sinful world, in this broken world, when all these three things don't align? What do you do? God calls you to be faithful to where He has called. God is not saying, wait till all of these three things are coming together and then you will. No, my friends. God is still calling you to the places, to the people, to the work, to what He's. God is still calling you and placed you in those things. Are you tracking me? Don't be discouraged. He is with you. Your work matters. Your work matters. So don't get frustrated by assigning worth and value to your work based on what culture says. Don't be frustrated because of lack of opportunity. Don't be frustrated because of lack of affinity or lack of ability. Where God has placed you, He has called you to those places. Be faithful. Be faithful. He has called you to those people. He has called you for the work itself. He has called you to flourish. He has called you to provide. He has called you to do those things through that work. I still remember when I was growing up, and just a quick personal story as we finish. See, when I definitely feel called as a pastor to plant this church, right, along with my family. Definitely, right? But even though I definitely sense God's calling, even though I definitely sense the passion for it, I sense the ability that God has gifted in terms of several years of training and all that, and even the opportunity to plant that came after a long time, even then, parts of my work is frustrating. Are you tracking me? Even though, right? Even though all of these things may come together, parts of your work can still be frustrating. I love preaching. I love explaining. I love this. You know what I hate? I hate preparing. I hate preparing. Oh my gosh, I cannot. I get exhausted after Sunday. I'm not a natural study type. I don't study, right? So it takes a lot to study, to prepare, to understand, and to really understand, right? To go in through me, and it takes a lot of effort for me. I'm not smart. I'm not a smart. I'm not this. It takes a lot. I don't like it. I get anxious. I get upset. I get angry. When I don't get it, when I'm not able to understand, when I'm not able to put this into some, it frustrates me through the week, and then I have to preach. And I enjoy preaching. I enjoy communicating. But every week it's like I'm writing an exam, right? You feel like you finish your exam when you're 25 or something. Every week I feel like I'm writing an exam. I'm writing a paper. Even though you may be in the sweet spot of your calling, not everything about your work is amazing. There are parts of your work that will always be frustrating, and that's okay. That's okay. God is still calling you into those spaces. God is calling you, even though work is frustrating, even though work is fruitless, even though work is tired, God is still calling you to the brokenness of this world, to the frustrations of this world, to be His image bearer. Are you tracking me? So my friends, I want you to understand God's calling, but not only understand God's calling, I want you to discern His calling. How do you discern His calling? By being faithful to what God has called you to in the present. Be faithful. If you're a student, be faithful to your calling. If you're working as a trainee, be faithful to your calling. And it is not just the work. God has called you as a son or a daughter. Be faithful as a son or a daughter. God has called you as a mother and father. Be faithful as a mother and father. He has called you as a husband and wife. Be faithful as a husband and wife. God has called you to this community. Be faithful in your calling to this community. God has called us to all kinds of things, both paid, unpaid, formal, non-formal, inside the house, outside the house. In all of those callings, God says, you be faithful. You be faithful. And slowly your affinity shows up. And slowly your ability comes up. And slowly opportunity opens up. I love 1 Corinthians 7:17. It says, only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him and to which God has called him. He has already called you. He has already called you to the spaces where you're working. Why? Because it's a sacred calling. No matter what work you do, it's a sacred calling from God. Let's pray.